Hey guys, in today's video you're going to learn about tympanic membrane and its parts. So let's get started. The plan of action for today's video is that we'll know the anatomy of the tympanic membrane under each headings. Like we'll know the position of it. We'll also learn the parts of it and a few points about the parts. We'll learn the layers of it. We'll also learn the nerve supply for it. So let's get started. Tympanic membrane is basically a thing which is present in between the external ear and the middle ear. And it essentially is a component of the external ear. As you already know, external ear has three components: the tympanic membrane, the pinna, and the external auditory canal. So the position of it is going to be oblique. It's not present exactly vertically in between. It's going to be a bit oblique. So oblique in the sense it is more lateral in the posterior superior part, and it is more medial in the anterior inferior part. And then the dimensions of it. The length is going to be, or the height of the tympanic membrane is going to be some 9 to 10 millimeters. Whereas the width is going to be approximately 8 to 9 millimeters, and the thickness is 0.1 millimeter. So these are the various measurements of the tympanic membrane. Well, tympanic membrane has two parts. It is two parts. The two parts of the tympanic membrane include pars tensa and the pars flaccida. Well, the pars tensa is this majority of the tympanic membrane. This entire thing is the pars tensa. Pars flaccida is this small part over here. This is pars flaccida. So let's see what pars tensa and pars flaccida means. Pars tensa means that it's going to be tense. So the tympanic membrane is a bit thicker here, whereas pars flaccida means it is flaccid. Well, if it is flaccid, it's going to be a bit thin, right? Okay, so that is the major difference. And the second difference is the position of it. The pars tensa forms the majority of the tympanic membrane. This forms a minority of the tympanic membrane. Third is that the pars tensa is in the lower part of the tympanic membrane. This is the upper part of the tympanic membrane. Fourth, let's see the various modifications. The pars tensa is going to be thickened in the periphery to form a ring over here. So you can see this ring, right? So this is called annulus tympanicus. Annulus tympanicus, by the way, is nothing but the thickening of the lateralmost part of the tympanic membrane. That's annulus tympanicus. Annulus is ring, so it's circular. That's why we call it like that. And yet another interesting fact about this is in the central part. The central part of the tympanic membrane, like here, it's going to be indentated. So in a lateral view, as expected, tympanic membrane won't look like this. Instead, it will look like this because it is indentated over here, and this part is called umbo. It is placed along with the tip of the malleolus. Well, the tip of the malleolus is a bone, so it's going to pull the membrane inwards, and that makes the inward protrusion called the umbo. So these two are the main different special names in the tympanic membrane. Yet another thing is that the tympanic membrane, when we are going to shine a torch, what happens is that the anterior-inferior quadrant is going to get illuminated. So this is the anterior-inferior quadrant. When we shine light from the external auditory canal, is going to be illuminated. And then let's see a few more points about pars flaccida. Pars flaccida has a special name. It's called the shrapnel's membrane. And also the pars flaccida, it's going to have it doesn't have anything, but then it's going to be present on the notch of Ravinus, which is basically over here. And these two folds, the anterior and the posterior malleal folds, previously they were called the malleolar folds, but let's take on to the new one. So the malleal folds. So it's going, okay, this one is the posterior one, and this one's the anterior one. So it's going to be present in between the posterior and the anterior malleal folds. and that's the position of it. Well, it is not as thick as the pars tensa, but so it's going to be a bit pinkish because all the tender things are pink, including babies. Okay, that was a joke. Okay, so let's see the layers of the tympanic membrane. The layers of the tympanic membrane includes 3 layers: the outer one, the middle, and the inner one. The outer membrane is called, the outer layer is called the epithelium. The middle one is the fibrous layer. The inner one is nothing but the mucus membrane. So the epithelium is going to be continuous with the outer layer epithelium, and the middle layer is going to be fibrous layer. I'll tell more about the fibrous layer. And the inner layer is going to be the mucous membrane. And then, okay, so this is going to be continuous with the middle layer. This is going to be continuous with the external layer. All right, so about the fibrous layer, it's going to be different in the pars tensa and the pars flaccida. Both of them will have fibrous layers, not that one has and one does not have. That's why the other one is thin. Okay, so there is this factor which separates the tympanic membrane into pars tensa and pars flaccida. The point is that both of them will be more like, they are disorganized. And the fibers are a bit thin in case of pars flaccida, whereas it is a bit organized and thick in case of pars tensa. Well, that's the main difference. Well, let's see the various ways by which the fibers are going to be there. The fibers are not oriented in one single direction. There are 3 directions in which the fibers are oriented. So let's see one by one. So the first one we're going to talk about is the circular fibers. Circular fibers look like this. From the umbo, it's going to become circular. And the second one is radial fibers. It's going to be looking like this. And the third one is parabolic fibers, which basically look like you. So the tympanic membrane does not look either like these. It's going to look like the entire thing. For example, to be precise, the tympanic membrane is going to look like this. Just for simplicity's sake, I drew it separately. So these are the 3 forms of the layers which is going to be present. So this one is the circular one, and this is the radial one, and this is the parabolic one. So those are the various types of fibers of the tympanic membrane, which is present at the middle fibrous layer. So let's see the last part of today's video, which is the nerve supply. The tympanic membrane is going to have a very good nerve supply. There are 3 nerves which we need to remember: anterior, posterior. So there are these 2 surfaces, which is nothing but the medial surface and also the lateral surface. So let's see them too separately. So the lateral surface is the surface which we look from the outer ear, like when we shine a torch and during an otoscopic examination we look this one. So this is going to have 2 nerve supplies: the nerve supply in the anterior part and the posterior part. The nerve supply in the anterior part is basically from the trigeminal nerve. It's called the auriculotemporal branch of the trigeminal nerve. And the posterior one, it's the branch from the vagus. So it's nothing but the auricular branch of vagus. Auricular branch of vagus, which is also called the Arnold's nerve. Does not mean it's a strong nerve, but then still it's just called an Arnold's nerve. And the medial part entirely is going to be supplied by the Jacobson's nerve, which is nothing but the tympanic. So it's a tympanic membrane. So it's a tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, which is the 9th cranial nerve. Well, so in today's video, let's just summarize. We learned something about the anatomy of the tympanic membrane. So tympanic membrane is going to be present in between external ear and the middle ear. We also saw the parts of it, the layers of it, the differences between pars tensa, pars flaccida. We also know the layers of the tympanic membrane. We know the various fibers which are present in the fibrous layer, and we also know the nerve supply. Well, thanks for watching today's video. Hope you learned something. Okay, stay on the cool side or the bright side of life, because it's cool, Iraq, Colorado.